G'day everyone. Thanks very much for taking the time to join us. My name is Michael Dockery. I'm the Chief Strategist of Design Industries, and welcome to one of our Meet the Vendor webinars where you get to meet some of the top marketplace vendors in the world, helping us make the most of the Atlassian platform and empower teams and add more capability and all of that type of good stuff. So before we start, just bear in mind that this session's being recorded, so if you've got questions and things like that, just be mindful of confidentiality. But today we've got Max from Tempo. He's a resident guru, and he's going to be taking us through some of Tempo's top products. And we're going to find out a bit more about how they work and how they fit within the team. So thanks, Max.
Thank you, Michael. Hello, everyone. Great and super happy to be here with you guys today. Today, I'll be going through a few use cases with Tempo. So let's jump right in. So you may or may not know about me just a little bit, but basically based in Montreal and from Tempo. That's all you have to know. So moving forward, I do the best introductions, but I do hope, however, that you have heard of Tempo. If you have not, Tempo is a solution that creates embedded solutions to enable organization to track, plan, and manage time. And we are one of the top vendors on the Atlassian Marketplace with more than 20,000 customers, large and small, such as Oracle, PayPal, and Adobe. If you're not too familiar with our product suite, we do have a few products both on server and data center, as well as on cloud. So on cloud, for instance, we do have Tempo Timesheets, which is the #1 time tracking solution on Atlassian Marketplace. Then we have Tempo Planner, which is an effective resource management in Jira. And we have Cost Tracker for Tempo Timesheets, which is a lean way to visualize your financial KPIs. Now on server and data center, we have Tempo Timesheets, Tempo Planner, and Tempo Budgets, which provides you guys with extensive financial tracking in Jira. So for today, we're going to be focusing mostly on data center and server. So that means we're going to be focusing on timesheets, planner, and budgets. And the way that we're going to be approaching this is to understand how they can all cooperate together. And the way we're going to do that is by first talking about capacity and resource planning with Tempo Planner, then time tracking using Tempo Timesheets, and finally bundling all of this good data together to better understand and track the cost of your projects with Tempo Budgets. So these are some of the use cases available, but essentially the reason why you want to better understand where you're spending your time, resources, and money is to ultimately make your business and your projects profitable, right? So the way that we're going to be achieving this is by adding some visibility to your projects and letting you have actionable business decisions through that data. So let's start with capacity and resource management with Tempo Planner. So most likely, one of the first things that's going to happen once you decide to tackle on a project is, or you've already decided that, like, hey, we're going to do this. One of the first steps, hopefully, that happens next is, well, when exactly are we going to be able to do this? And that conversation lies in when are we next, when are our resources next available? So, it might not be, next week, it might be in 2 months or so on. So one thing that you can use with Tempo Planner is the capacity report, which sort of highlights when plans have been done and when availabilities happen next. And a cool thing and convenient thing that we can do is then we can group by a certain amount of data and we can filter by a certain amount of data. So here, for example, we're filtering by a certain location and we're grouping by roles. So let's take into this example a little further. So let's say that we have a project to create a website, and we need 3 devs, 1 PM, and 1 designer. So we could quickly go into our capacity report and find that, hey, when are we next available? So we can see for the period of July 5th to 11th that we do have a lot of availabilities for these roles for the certain location that we're looking for. And so at a glance, you're able to see when you're next going to be available. And so this can tremendously help and streamline things. Now, the next thing that you might want to do is actually reserve these people and these resources just to make sure that they're not overbooked or they're not double booked. And one way to do this would be with the resource planning view from Tempo Planner again. So what we're looking at right here is a single view that highlights all of your resources. Of course, that could be too much information. So once again, you can filter down that data. In this case, we filtered it down for a specific team. And so you have much more of the data or the information that you're looking for. Now, in this case, the reason why we have this is basically we can have a more granular view if we want of the plans or the availabilities of people. And as well, this can be a great way of booking time and making plans for others. So in this case, we can see for Beverly Perkins, which is a developer, which was someone that we needed. We can see from that week, we created some plans. And so the check mark basically means that she's fully booked, or she has like fully planned all the plans that she needs for the day. Eric, in comparison, is partially booked. So you can see the 4 and the yellow lines, which means that he still has some availabilities left. And if ever we want to expand and learn a little more about what the person or the user has been booked on, we can click and expand that view, and then we'll have a better understanding of where his plans have been allocated. And so this can be a great way to book your resources ahead of time and also make sure that you have an understanding of when they're next going to be available as well.
And then you've got the ability to sort of look at the top level and then just drill down and actually end up on the individual and their daily plan.
Exactly, yeah. And that's, I'm sure, really convenient. So once the plans have been created, then one thing, you're ready to start the project, one thing that you might want to do is lock that time. And so from an end user, we should try and make it as convenient as possible. And one way that we do this is via Timesheets and My Work. So My Work is sort of the home base of operations of a user. And what you see here is basically the view for Gregory Nolan. This is, in a way, his timesheets, but you can see a few elements. The first one that I want to highlight is, on Monday, you can see that he's logged his time on a certain issue for 8 hours. So he's, in a way, completed his day. And on Tuesday, you can see that he worked more. He logged in 10 hours, and he worked on, 2 issues instead of 1. And on Wednesday and so on, you can see that no time has been logged yet. But the interesting element is that you have some cards here that are corresponding to a certain plan that has been booked for Gregory. So as a result, it's very easy for him to convert these cards into actual logged time, which will be reflected in Tempo, in Jira. On the issue, you'll have a better understanding of what he's actually been working on. Now, there's a few other elements that are within this page, but as to not overfill you guys with data, I'll wait until the demo to show a little more information. So as I mentioned, there's multiple ways for the end user to log time. So we saw the Tempo My Work view, but there's also a Jira view. So directly on a issue, we have a mobile app just to make it convenient, and you can also have a timesheet view if this is something that you prefer from a personal level. Now, once the data or the time, has been logged, one thing that you might want to do is to ensure that the data is accurate and you're confident that the data is accurate. And one way to do this is with the approval mechanism. So let's say you're using time and you're tracking time for CapEx and OpEx, for example, for government grants, or you want to bill your customers, then you might want to make sure that that data is as accurate as can be just to make sure that you're not invoicing your customers for the wrong things, and you're actually invoicing them for the right amounts. So one thing that you can do is basically your team lead is going to review your timesheets for a certain period, whether that be a week or a month, and they can have a look at the timesheets if they want, and basically approve it. And what that does is it locks the timesheet, and it basically means that we have some sort of guarantee that the data is accurate, and so it adds some sort of visibility and traceability as well in terms of the data.
Yeah,
so in a way, it's like
peer review process.
Exactly.
Again, yeah.
It's like semi-auditing, if you want.
Yeah.
And the reason why you want this, it all feeds to the added value of Tempo timesheets, which is the reporting view. So it's not necessarily just the process of logging time that's important, it's what can we do with that information. And there are numerous use cases that you can do. All depends on the company, of course. One thing that we can do in the example that I described, which was of creating a certain project, is to ensure that we're spending our time on the right places and that our projects are on track. So we can see for the team that we had with the 3 devs, the designer and the PM, excuse me. So for that team, for the period of July, we can see that they worked a total of 851 hours. Now, what we've done is basically we've put that information in a report. So a report, you can think of it more as a pivot table in Excel, as in you can filter by certain variables and then you can group the variables as well. So in this case, we filtered by the team and we're grouping by accounts. Now, Tempo accounts are essentially just a folder or a way of categorizing the data. So just to simplify it a little bit more, it's just a way of organizing the data. And what we can see is we've grouped it by those accounts. And then we can have a breakdown for the month of where time has been logged. Of course, we could expand further on the data. We could dig deeper into the data as well. But in our case, we could simply look at these accounts and be like, maybe we are spending too much time on AK control. Maybe we're not spending enough time on green cloud management. And so this could give you a good indication of what to do. I did mention the use case of billable and invoices. So you can export that data to a CSV, for example, and then you can package that and send that out to your clients if you so desire. So that could be something else that you want. Yeah, so in terms of now, we've planned the data, or excuse me, we've planned the projects, we've booked our resources. Once the project has started and people have started logging their time, then we have that information to have an understanding of whether we're on track for time purposes, if we're spending time at the right spaces, right space, yeah. And the next thing that we want to better understand is whether we're profitable. So we have our total for the month of 851 hours. But does that mean that we're profitable? And so one way that we can tie all of this together is with Tempo budgets. So essentially with Tempo budgets, it basically will take your defined scope to calculate and forecast a certain variable, and then compare that to what's being tracked in actuality. So what I mean by that is once you've defined your scope, so let's say for a whole month for these specific issues, right? So for the web team, for the month of July, we want to look at our progress. The second step would be to see, well, what exactly do we forecast our costs to be? And so that can be based on, salary, maybe there's a fixed expense here and there, and that's going to make sort of our baseline. And the next step is to add your actual costs. So as you're working on the project, you might log time, you might add actual expenses and things like this. And so this is going to compare or add itself to the folio and also compare itself to the progress or to the forecast that we did to show you where you stand in terms of progress. So what we can see here, for example, for the, again, new web development project, taking again the same example that we had earlier, we can see that we're 15 days ahead of schedule. We're 45% under budget. In terms of revenue, however, it's a little tight. We're only 0.3% behind. And in terms of a profit margin, we're only at 0.97. So while we're very ahead in terms of budgets and days ahead, we might want to closely monitor these last two metrics just to make sure that everything is still going to be as we want it to be.
So how would we do that? So we're ahead of time, but we're marginal. So what would we do to bring the project back?
So that could be perhaps of utilizing more cost-efficient resources, or it could be about perhaps making sure that we spend our time on more added value tasks, and it could be also of redefining how you measure your revenue, of course. It can be that maybe you were undervaluing your resources, for instance. That can be a thing as well.
And I guess really it's about just having those indicators so you can ask the questions.
Precisely,
and change as appropriate.
Exactly. So one of the biggest value of this view, of the overview view, is that it's in a way in real time. So as you're working on a project, this will be modified. And so you can quickly monitor the health of your projects that way.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yep.
So with that being said, let me hop on. I believe you should be able to see this. So this is my instance. Brilliant. So what I'll be focusing on today with the time that I have left. Yes, I have plenty of time. So what I'll be focusing on is going to be on Tempo timesheets. So I did mention that we were going to have a quick look. So one thing that we can do is have a look at Taylor and for her week. And so what we can see is, for example, on Monday, she has no time being logged. On Tuesday, she has 6 hours out of 8. So the 8 hours has been defined as what is her workload for the day. So that at the end of the week, you know, she's supposed to be working a total of 40 hours, as we can see from the top. That amount you can define. And so if someone is working part-time, or if a different office is working a different amount of time, that is also something that you can define with Tempo. So for Taylor,
sorry, if I could ask, what do you think from a cultural point of view? So yeah, Taylor hasn't tracked any time Monday, but she has on Tuesday and Wednesday. So what did she do on Monday? And it's interesting when the time tracking culture, and I guess interested in your feedback, where I think our view is it's best to have track the time live while you're doing it. If not, make sure it's in by the end of the day. So when someone accesses a report tomorrow morning or later that evening, it's correct.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. These are the best practice that we typically recommend. But the truth and the reality is it depends on the company. Some company really strictly enforce end of day, we want you to have booked your time. Whereas others, it's going to be, well, at the end of the month, it's all good. Personally, end of the month is way too late because you tend to forget what you've worked on. And so you tend to lose in terms of granularity. And that is not as good because obviously you want to better understand where you're spending your time for a high level overview, right?
Well, you want your project reports as well. You want to be able to see work closing and again, going back to the budget, if you're coming to that at the end of the month and you're relying on month-old data, as opposed to as a PM, you can scan that once a week and get a sense. So yeah, I think it's interesting that culture shift as we go in through the digital transformation, the new ways of working, the importance of having the data accurate and up to date in a very, very timely way because everything's live. That's how we're doing reporting. So you never know when someone wants the latest report. It might be in half an hour. So how old's the data we're going to be looking at?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things on that. From a user standpoint, you know, being asked to log time just for the sake of logging time really sucks. And the odds are that you're going to be facing a lot of resistance. So the way that we typically recommend on people to log their time is to first explain the reason why they're logging time. And I think you nailed it, right? When you mentioned that a PM might need that information to better understand how they're doing on their project, are they on track and whatnot. And it might be a good explanation to say like, well, hey, if we have this information on a monthly basis, we are in the dark for 3 weeks out of 4. Whereas if you say, hey, if we have this information on a weekly basis, then we have a much better understanding of where we got to shift our focus if we need to. Maybe we're doing fantastic. I don't know. It all depends on this. So there are a few ways of making that transition a lot easier. Obviously from a tempo and features perspective, plans can tremendously help you. So when you're planning things ahead of time, you can create plans, and that can easily be converted into time. So example, this one, we have 2 hours of management, and I can quickly lock that time, and it's going to book me for 2 hours. So if plans have been created ahead of time, that will really make it convenient and easy on the user. Another way that you can enforce it is by making sure that, well, if it's tied to your payroll, then that really makes it a hard stop in a way. So what can happen is you can have a period that closes on a weekly basis. There's also a monthly, but in your case, you can have it on a weekly basis. So the hard stop is, well, at the end of the week on, I believe it's something like Sunday midnight, the last week is going to be closed off. It's going to be locked. And so it's going to be impossible for a normal user to unfreeze or lock time on this. So that can be super convenient to remove the idea of someone that say took vacation last week or took time off last week, and then they would shift it to another issue. So that would remove that. Yeah. Obviously, you can unfreeze it.
It's a tricky balance when we're putting in, I guess, validation and then starting to freeze data. Because if someone forgets, suddenly it's inconvenient. But so you've got that sort of enforcement versus, I think, explaining the why and the how. It's like, this helps us manage our capacity so we don't overbook people. It helps us with our billing and optimize the way we're working. It then helps us with our project financials so we can optimize the profitability of the company, which was going to roll down into your salary and your bonus. And it also is going to roll up into our reporting so we can do really effective project and portfolio management so everyone's got a view, and that's why you do it. So pretty please, cherry on top, fill in the timesheets.
And if ever you're stuck, you forgot or whatnot, which it happens to me all the time, there's a mechanism in place that essentially helps you unfreeze the timesheet of someone. So it's called a grace period. So you can grant a grace period to a user and be like, all right, please have it filled, within the next few hours or so.
Yeah. Great.
All right. And so now the view that we see here is, we've seen it before, but maybe you're more someone that likes to see things on a schedule or agenda view. So we do have that available as well, where it's more specific to a certain hour, for instance. And we also have a timesheet view as well, if this is what you so desire. And in each cases, it's always very convenient to log your time. So there's a few ways. First off, you can either go to the date, click log time, search the issue that you're trying to do. We have different types. So hey, if you always work on the same issue, then you can have it in your favorite tabs. Click it. You can add a description if you so desire, the time, the amount that you worked on. Let's say we worked 2 hours on this, and then you can log your time.
And always update the remaining estimate, please.
Yes. And then something else that you can do for convenience sake, again, is you can simply drag and drop this. And again, this would serve the same, it's the same idea, the same concept. It's just now based on your personal preferences. All right, and what you can see, yeah, so here there's going to be different times for weeks, and at the end of the period, then you can submit that period, and your manager or team lead is the one that's going to most likely be receiving that timesheet to determine whether you're good to go, or if you have to review or make some changes to your timesheets. All right. So next up is Temple Planner. So we've quickly saw the resource planning view. Now, as I mentioned, you do have the ability to change your filters. So we could filter by certain roles. Say we're looking for designers. So this could be splendid if, say, you can see Jesse, he's fully booked on January 21st to 27th, whereas his colleagues are fairly free. So this can be a great way of avoiding that someone is overbooked. And also what you can do is you can book for that, plan time directly for them. So again, very same concept as logging your time. You just determine what the issue you want to work on is, the period of time or the dates that you want the person to work on, how many hours per day, and voila. Now, one thing that we have for plans is the ability to add a reviewer. Essentially, that means someone that will approve those plans or not. Since in this case, I am working as an admin, I don't necessarily need a review, but say you're asking for time off, you could create plans for yourself to take time off, say next week or in 2 weeks. And what you can do is you can have your manager or your boss as a reviewer so that they can approve that timesheets and those vacation plans. That way it sort of avoids you pestering them every 2 days about, hey, is it cool if I take my vacation? So you can avoid that chat, and then you can avoid the scenario in which they forget about it.
And you can compare against your planned work, so you don't end up with 3 or 4 people of similar skill or whatever going on leave at the same time during a critical time in a project. So you've got
exactly.
That view. Yeah.
So some things to see here from this view. So we can see that this developer is really overbooked. So they're working 10.5 hours per day, whereas David is partially booked. And so we can have a look at what his plans are for that certain period of time. And in comparison, we can see Jesse is booked 8 hours per day. So he's okay. And what's convenient, as I mentioned, is that we have an overview of everyone for the view that you're interested in, all packed within one window. So if I was looking for, say, a specific team, then I'll only have the data that I'm interested in, only these 2 guys. And what I'll be able to see is how much time they have available for the period of time that I'm looking at. Again, I can look at different things, so I can book time based on my little issue view on the site. And now, before I head on to budgets, there's a few elements that are quite interesting to highlight. The first one being Tempo Teams. I didn't really talk about it too much, but just like a normal organization, we do have teams. So it's just a way of clustering your users together and make sure that they are tracking time on a relevant way. That can be used now for reporting functionalities as well. It just organizes the data in a really neat way. So for instance, we have custom web development. We have Eric as the team lead, and then we have his people over there. What Eric could now do is he could jump in the timesheet and have an understanding of where people have logged the time. You could also expand the view and see how much planner has been booked, how much of that time is billable, how much of that time was required, and what does that mean in terms of percentage, right? So this is just a way of doing things. You can change the You can change the months, the period of time, just to make sure that everything is neat, everything is okay. They're working on the right stuff as well. That's always important. I did mention the approval view, so that's just his way of saying, well, you know, Amy is ready to submit her timesheet. Let me have a look. Or, hey, you forgot to do some elements. Please have a second look at it. I'll grant you a grace period so that you can make some modifications here and there.
I think what may be interesting to note at this point in time, because it's not just, I guess, the development team, because what's interesting is when you want to look at organizational sort of portfolio management, you need to see the sales and marketing team, you need to see the legal team and the support and customer service teams. And yeah, the ability, even for the customer service team, to be able to track their time against tickets raised by the client. You get all sorts of interesting reports out of there. In terms of, yeah, just where you're spending your time, which client's taking your time. Yeah, there's so many use cases for being able to understand where your team is spending time better, and being able to act on that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Historically, it used to be only, the development team, but as Jira has expanding, so has the teams that actually can use and should use Jira. And so for us, for instance, we use it a lot with marketing, just to better understand what types of projects that we're working on, and truly see like, hey, we spent 500 hours just creating this white paper. Maybe that wasn't optimal. Maybe we should have spent it on something else. So
update the remaining estimate.
It can really change and really help for all teams now. So yeah, you do see a lot of now use cases that are starting where the HR team is going to hop on Jira, and so it can be used to track vacation, for instance, which is always nice. Overtime sometimes as well. Time off for dentist appointments, things like that. So you also have your convenience for these types of elements as well. And yeah, I did mention the log time. So that process is extremely simple. As I mentioned, it was, so we did start with the creation for these variables. Now, please note that it's very easy to change this variables to whatever we want. So don't worry if you didn't take the right thing. You can quickly change that to whatever you want. Let me try something that has data. Brilliant. So over here, it's a great view. So we have for the month of February what everyone has worked on. We can see at the bottom the amount that all of these users have logged for the month of February. So that's 222 hours. And then if we're looking at a different view, we can change that. Say we want the grids to represent a full month, or in terms of weeks, because maybe we don't need so much granularity. Maybe we just have a good overview of where time has been spent. That could be done. Then we can add further granularity by saying like, hey, how much of our time was actually billable? So this can be really tremendous if you're doing invoices, for example, and you want to organize your time between what can we bill the client and what we cannot, even though we worked on for the client's project in both cases. And this is just a way of adding data if you want to add data based on what you find useful. And of course, you can log time for certain users if you have the right permissions or if you want to do so. But the idea here is the granularity that you can reach is fairly great. And the idea of being able to export that for your, say, if you have an other system and that you want to sync that with your other systems. So there have been a lot of use cases in which people want this data for their payrolls, because a certain, say the development team sits in Jira, and then they have their payroll within another system. So you'll want to then export this data and use it over there. if that is, the thing. You don't have to. Right, so that is it for reports. Obviously, we have different types of report. Plan versus actual, which is great. Plan time also just gives you an overview of where time has been planned and capacity that we saw together. But for the interest of time, let's jump into budgets. So budget is fairly more thorough, but as I mentioned, you'll start by defining what your scope is. So what are the JIRA issues that are going to fall under a certain folio in a way. So you define what this is, then you define what you want to do with that project. Say we want to do just, let's say, a simple cost. So you'll define what the name is, your currency. So you can have Australian dollars as well. That does exist. The start date, end date, what projects are within that scope, the portfolio, and so on and so forth. You can add some, of course, some custom data as well for the sake of organization and labeling if you want. So in this case, we added risk level just to have, this could be used if you want to have a quick glance at, well, I gotta keep these guys in check because the risk level is much higher than some of the other projects that we have in mind. So once that's done, then you'll most likely have a folio that's created, and you'll be greeted with the overview page. Now, once you start, most likely it's going to be empty. So you'll first have to start with your planned costs. Your planned costs are used for your forecasting or your baseline. And how it works is you can add your salaries or your, that's the thing, your salaries. So say Taylor is the CEO and she's working, we think she's going to work a certain amount of time on a certain project, and we're going to, we have an internal rate for her of X amount. I think it's 150 per hours. You can also add fixed expenses over here. So say we expect to buy chairs and tables and things like that, or we expect to purchase some sort of convention tickets, or we expect to spend some plane tickets to be able to see the clients. So these are the things that you could add over here. And you can also schedule when these expenses are going to happen. So that way it's going to help with your forecasting as well. So for example, if you believe that in 2 weeks you're going to be flying to see the customer, pre-COVID era or post-COVID era, what's going to happen is your forecast is going to reflect this. So you might have a flat line, and at the end, in 2 weeks, you might have a little bump in your costs, planned costs, because you've actually scheduled an expense to happen there. So once that is fully done, then you might want to add your actual cost in a way. So the cool thing is how that synergizes with Tempo timesheets, because as people are logging their time, this is also reflected in the Tempo budgets folio. So for Taylor, for instance, we see that actually she was billed for 110 instead of 150, and we can see that she's logged for the period that we're looking at over here. She's logged 278 hours for a grand total of 30K. And then you also have the different members of that team that have each logged a certain amount of work. And of course, you can dig deeper to see more information. So, hey, did we make any changes to that person? What exactly did she log? Where exactly, did we change the rates for which she was, costing us, for instance? So this can be great information, and you might or might not want to edit it, which you can do. So you could add,
Max,
sorry, go ahead.
Does I guess the crossover here between the PM looking at the financials and I guess things like cash flow forecasting, where's the crossover with the financial team with this particular tool? Should the PM be talking to the financial team about this all the time, or is it separate, do you think?
That's a great question. I think it highly depends again on the organization and what you're trying to get out of this. For example, if you're only looking at understanding whether you're on track and having some sort of visual feedback to tell you that, then the finance department might not be required. That being said, I highly doubt that to be just the case. So we do have report capabilities that are fully catered to the finance team, whether it be an expense or revenue report that can give you a more detailed and thorough explanation of where your costs have been taken from. So again, this can be a continuous conversation between the two departments, or whether it just be of a presentation. So for us at Tempo, for example, what we do when we have a roadmap is that we do discuss in terms of what we're planning to do, but of course, I'm sure there's a segment of how much that's going to cost us based on forecasting. And obviously, when forecasting and money is involved, then the financial team is also involved to better understand what that means for us in terms of ROI, right? So that could be one other way of getting the communication or the sync going between two different teams.
Great.
But at the same time, obviously, profitability and things like that can be useful. It really depends on what type of view or what type of data you're trying to get out of that. So depending on what your end goal is, obviously either your report is going to be different that you're going to choose from, or it's simply what you're going to be defining as a scope for your project.
And I guess you might have different folios for different projects, but then you might have a portfolio that rolls it all up, and that's going to be something that the finance team would be interested in.
Yeah, exactly. So it's so great that you asked these questions, because here what we can see is a unique folio, say marketing budget 2017. But then we can bundle that up into a whole, in a way, portfolio that will include different folios together. And so as we can see, we're doing
this
terrible.
One needs a bit of attention.
Yeah, this one needs a lot of love. But as you can see here, it includes 3 different projects.
And it looks like you've got one that's causing all the problems.
And yeah, we have one that's doing really, really terrible. And so this would tell us really at glance value, like, hey, I think we need to put a lot of effort into this.
Hopefully we're looking at it once a week or something, so we don't let it slide so much. But yeah. And I guess there's the importance again, of live data, because you can create these portfolios, but you need to make sure that someone's coming in and looking. And I think that's something that I find interesting as well, as what's the cadence? Does the PM come and look once a week? In which case you do have to have the time tracking in once a day. And how often are the financial team coming through and doing they're going to do it once a month as they do their end of month. So yeah, just getting that cadence so we don't slide for too long. And that's the importance of that live data as we find out our challenges and our opportunities where we're doing well, so we can do more of it sooner.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, it's going to depend on things like what's the scope of your project. Say if it's a 3-day project, then obviously you're going to look at it every day. Whereas if it's like a 2-year project, at the start especially, you're going to look at it maybe like once every 3 months, just to because nothing really has started, and then it's going to start within the later half of those 2 years or something like that.
And what I also like about looking at reports frequently is the time taken to actually review the report reduces significantly, because it doesn't change that much and you kind of remember where it was. Because if you're looking at it frequently, whereas if you come in once a month, it's like, okay, where was it? What's changed? And things have kind of moved. You've got to spend all the time, as opposed to going, open the report. Okay, that looks good. On to the next. Versus open the report. That doesn't look so good. I'll spend a little bit of time and find some things that we can shift. Yeah, it's interesting, that cadence question.
Yeah, it's also very convenient to have everything within Jira or within the same, uh, uh, ecosystem, if you will. Because if you have then the question or the problematic of, well, we have to grab this data from a certain data silo in Excel, for instance, and then Jira from another data silo, and then from another data silo, and all put that together, then you're looking at just, you might end up having the same results, right? It's for sure it's doable. It's just the time that it's going to take you to achieve the same result is going to be so much longer, right?
And it becomes not a choice, whereas the PM might be sitting there worried at 10 o'clock at night, and they can just they click, and there's the report.
Yeah.
And they can take some worries off their head, go, yeah, I knew that was wrong. Okay, I'm going to do something. You can't do that if the data's not there or it's in all these separate systems. So yeah, and that person's got to wait in the dark till the end of the month, play with Excel, put it onto PowerPoint, explain to the boss that there's a problem. Nuts. Yeah. So hopefully, yeah, we can see more organizations sort of starting to make the most of, I guess, yeah, it is the new ways of working, which is keep the data up to date and yeah, collaborate with your teammates. And then, yeah, utilize these tools because they can provide so much guidance and prevent problems and allow us to capitalize on opportunities. So, yeah, it's great to see these things coming along.
So that was a rough overview of all of the Tempo products. So just to give you guys a quick recap of what we saw, basically we looked at a way to plan time ahead. So once you've defined that, hey, we're going to be tackling on a certain project, an understanding of when you can actually see those projects or in fruition, and also reserve the resources needed to have these staff members for the project, just to make sure that everything, the gear sort of starts working together and nice and in a fluid motion. Then we also saw a way to track time and make it very convenient for everyone to have the time be logged and how that time translates into actionable data, right? From the reporting view, where you can use that then for either understanding where time has been spent, to understand if we're spending it on the right time, on the right things, or even to be sent out as invoices or for, say, financial reports for, say, CapEx and OpEx, and use that for a free government grant, essentially. And then finally, we all bundled that information from the logged time that we had to better monitor certain projects and understand whether our projects are profitable or not. So if you want more information, then you can book a demo on our website, but I would highly suggest that you go through our partner, Design Industries, more than capable of helping us, as you've heard within this presentation. And if you're looking for some resources, we do have some blogs available, some past webinars on our YouTube channel, for instance, and we have our help center that contains some Q&A, some fact-based articles, and others as well, some tutorials that can help you guys out. And finally, if you have a certain feature that you're not seeing or you haven't seen that's not out yet, we do have a portal out there where you can submit your ideas, and we review these and we put them on our roadmap if it aligns with what we're trying to achieve as for the vision of the products. And finally, if you want to reach out to someone, again, I would highly reach out to our partners, Design Industries. They're the one that really are going to help you guys out. And with that, that's all I had. If you have any questions, that would be the time.
All right, thanks very much, Max. And yeah, I guess, yeah, from a Design Industries point of view, we've been using the time tracking budgets for a long time. And yeah, it's just interesting how it allows you to completely understand where your time is being spent. And it's interesting as you sort of develop the time tracking culture and the scheduling and capacity management culture, it's just makes such a difference to how we end up operating. So Yeah, no, that was very comprehensive, Max. I think we've covered a lot. I think we've got our questions answered actually. So really appreciate your time. And yeah, look forward to speaking with you again. And yeah, thanks everybody for watching. And yeah, if you need help with any of these things, yeah, please reach out. I'm happy to chat. So thanks very much.
Anytime you want to do this, just let me know, and I'd be happy to hop on another one of these.
Cheers. Awesome. Thanks very much, Max.